And our guest today is Lesley Lupo. And Lesley is an author, and she wrote a book. What was it called? It's called Remember Every Breath is Precious. Let me tell you a little bit about herself. Aware of the immortal soul, Lesley combines the training of a therapist, the brilliant mind of a CEO, and the gentle soul of a best friend. In 1988, a stampede of horses crushed Lesley against the hay barn. With gray skin and lips as blue as her jeans, Lesley was declared dead. But she stood a few feet away and watched it all. Remember Every Breath is Precious is her book, which recounts Lesley's account of that experience, of her journey upstairs, her talks with light beings, and the help she received with her decision to stay or return to Earth. She kept her original CT scans that show the severity of her injury. Most neurosurgeons that look at it are shocked to think that she survived, much less was not mentally incapacitated. Anyway, I've got a whole bio and more information on Lesley with some pictures on QuarianRadio.com, and I invite you to go over and check it out. And but we're going to save, not just going to read it, we're going to talk about it. That's more interesting when we talk about it. My co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex. Hi, dear.
Yeah, so what we want to find out is if you had planned the stampede that killed you for your own evolution, what's the deal? What are you trying to teach Lesley?
And welcome to our show, Lesley. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
You were traveling, and you just got home, huh? You were out and about.
Yes. I do a lot of traveling here and there.
Excellent. Well, we're very excited about your book, and we would like you to start at the beginning. What led you up to this incident? You told us about your life. You have a ranch that you work on or live in?
Oh, yes.
What's your background?
Oh, yes. Well, I was married at the time, and my husband owned a ranch, and I worked with him. I had been in the hospitality industry all my life, with restaurants and hotels, and we met, and we started dating, and when we married, I worked there at the resort. It's a dude ranch, but it's more like a dude resort in Tucson. And at that time in my spiritual life, I was like agnostic, borderline atheist, because I just had no interest in that at all. And I had no interest in spirituality at all. What had happened was, I went down to the hay barn. A couple of horses had run down with their saddles on, and I went down to get them. And all of a sudden, while I was in the middle of trying to pull these two horses out, my soul, if you had asked me at the time, I would have said my mind. My soul popped out of my body and stood about 15 feet away, witnessing the stampede. So, in spite of the fact that I watched myself struggle as the horses were running around me and trying not to be knocked over and struggling and screaming, I personally, my soul didn't feel a thing. It was almost as if I was watching it in a very, very dispassionate, really actually serene way. I didn't feel any tension. I didn't feel any negativity. The sense I got was like the completion of a circle. That was it. It was, I was done with that body. It was just letting it go. Kind of like when you take off a jacket and you just kind of toss it on the bed. You've had like a nice fitted jacket on and you just kind of come home, unbutton it, and just, and you feel a sense of relief. And again, at that time, I would have thought that when someone dies, they just go to dust. There's nothing left afterwards, and they had no interest in it. And the first thing I did was giggle. I looked around the corral. Everything had settled. My body had flipped away from the horses, laying face down. And I started thinking, and I thought, this is it? This is what everyone's so afraid of? And I was looking around from side to side, and I said, I'm still here. I'm still thinking. At that point, I was aware of this immense amount of love and safety and softness around me. And eventually, I was looking at all my senses were highly much stronger. They were like energized. It was like I was hearing better and seeing better and smelling everything more, having a much larger range of my senses that I was able to have. It was kind of like before I had been wrapped up in cotton batting where my senses were numb. Go ahead. Did you have a question?
Well, I was reading. Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. I'm reading your excerpt from the book. You said, I was free. All physical constraints vanished. Previously unaware of how tight and squished one feels inside the human form, I felt fresh and completely unrestricted, like I'd peeled off a head-to-toe body girdle that was 4 sizes too small. Every cell separated into buzzing particles, and a crisp, sweet breeze blew through. With no aches and pains, I felt completely invigorated and more alive than ever before.
Yes.
So that's a
really heightened. Yeah, really. Everything was, every little sound, but it was beautiful. It wasn't, all the smells, everything was so much more heightened, but it was in harmony, like an extraordinary symphony. Everything just flowed and fit together. And then I thought, oh, my ghost, and I looked down at myself, and I wasn't a ghost. I was wearing exactly what I was wearing on Earth, but I couldn't see through me. But I did notice this tiny little blue line, kind of like a dark electric blue line that was moving right on my skin, maybe just like 1/4 of an inch big. And this kind of nice, kind of cobalt blue, kind of seeping off of me. Eventually, the rides came back because I was trying to get the horses up before the rides came back. And at that point, Tucson just started shifting. It was almost, it started fading and moving. Something came in moving at the same time. And it kind of felt like there was these, the only way I could describe them is that they were incredibly blue-white bright triangles that seemed to be very conscious, that were flitting around me, kind of keeping me contained as I went into this other realm. I didn't see a tunnel of light. I didn't feel myself floating up away from the earth. I just felt it kind of overlapping. At the same time, I also remember wondering, was this always here and I couldn't see it? Kind of like when I was watching myself die, if someone had seen me witness, there was nobody around. And if someone had been there, they would have said, oh my gosh, she suffered horribly. And I didn't suffer at all. The body suffered and screamed and fought. But I was like very detached from it. And after all this rushing around, suddenly I'm in this area. And again, I didn't think of heaven or hell or concepts like that. So I came to call it upstairs when I came back to Earth because I didn't quite know what to make of everything. And the beauty, the colors are so rich, and the beauty was so intense. In fact, I was just thinking about that today. I was driving to work, and there's all this new little grass coming up, and it's colors in the deserts are very dull. Everything here is kind of a greenish gray, or it almost looks like there's dust on everything. There's nothing really vibrant. So I think that's why when we go to places like Ireland or Scotland, when those colors are so bright, or that new green that comes out in the spring, and seeing that really bright green when I was driving into work, it always gets me teary-eyed because it reminds me of how extraordinarily beautiful it is upstairs. The richness of color, the saturation, the fact that everything was kind of generating its own light. It wasn't like a hologram, like you could put your hand through it because I touched it, but it was not. It just seemed to have its own source of energy or light. And I looked at my hands; they looked like I was 20 again. I didn't have fingernail polish or jewelry or anything. I was a female, and my hair was actually short, which is funny because I've always loved long hair. And I remember thinking, oh, short, why can't I have long hair, Because you're making an adjustment.
So you're saying that you looked like you were 20, but your hair changed. Because I always wear my hair long, too. That would be very strange to suddenly have short hair. Did you ever get any insight onto why that was going on, that your hair actually was... And how short was it? Was it...
No, I never really meditated on that. I never got an insight up there. But at the same time, then what had happened was there's a lot of things that I put in the book that made perfect sense when I was upstairs. But when I came back down and I think about them, I'd go, what did that mean? Because everything they say to you, you just get. It makes sense and you're in this flow. But I noticed that, it wasn't like I was disappointed that I didn't have long hair. I think I was just more surprised because on Earth I'd always loved really having really long hair. And to go up and have like big curls on my head, I thought, that's interesting. It wasn't like I was disappointed or upset by it. It just was something different than I noticed. Because I was trying to do my best to observe.
She spoke like you. It was still this. It wasn't like you went to a past life. You're still in this body.
Yes.
Except for the hair. And the age.
But I was also much younger looking. In fact, everyone that I met and talked to upstairs looked like they're in their early 20s. Everyone, except for their eyes. They had these million-year-old eyes that were just like the universe spinning in them. The wisdom that everyone has in their eyes is phenomenal. Like my soul group, when we were talking, they looked like they were in college. And it's funny because I do my lecture at the university in the spiritual psychology class once a semester. And when the kids will come up and talk to me afterwards, and they're all in their early 20s, and I look at them and they've got like these baby eyes. They look all like the same age as they did upstairs, but there's the wisdom, there's nothing. There's excitement, there's life, there's curiosity, but I call them in my mind, these are like baby eyes, compared to the wisdom of so many older souls,
Do you ever encounter wisdom eyes in human beings that are down here on Earth?
Oh, yes, many times. Yeah.
Who encountered? Do you remember any particular people? You don't need to name names, but like were they like a priest, or were they your father, or were they your child, or what relationship were they to?
Well, there's many of my clients are coming. People that come in for like an inner journey work are usually people that are older souls. Younger souls, you could have a Fortune 500 CEO that's spiritually and emotionally like in first grade, And you can have the busboy coming up to bring you your water be a PhD as far as soul growth. So it's the people that are focused on the bigger picture, there are people that feel a very deep commitment to growing. And when I'm in groups of people like that, you see great wisdom and great light and many, many, many lifetimes of experiencing and growing. It would be like if you had your PhD in physics and you wanted to sit down and talk shop about math. You're not going to go talk to a fifth grader. You're going to want to find another master's level or PhD that you can discuss things with. So it just kind of is like that. Many of the people I work with, many of the people that come to me as clients are older souls that want to, facilitate or streamline their journey and make it less complicated and simplified so that they can focus more without having to go sit on a mountain, and leave the... Yeah.
Yeah, so what's the message that they wanted you to take back to humanity?
Well, I guess so. Let me get the procedure. We'll save the message for when you get sent back. So while this was going on, and that's a good question, Sasha. I don't mean to, but I want to keep in sequence. So you were free. You're out of your body. Who discovered you? What was going on with your body? And then also, what was going on? You mentioned you met your soul group. Now, I read a book by Dr. Michael Newton, a whole series of books, and he described how, and tell me yes or no, this is what happened to you. He described how as soon as he was out of his body, and shortly after his guide, there's like a personal guide, came, and then these are like 40,000 cases that he documented, and his group did. And then they went to a council, and they eventually went to their soul group. So what happened to you? How far did you get in the sequence before you were brought back to life, because you're alive?
Right. Well, the one thing that I was shown was that everybody's different. So some people may go up in that format that he went into. I went directly to my soul group. In fact, first of all, I was alone in this beautiful, oak forest by a river, which made sense to me because always on Earth, I've always been drawn to forests next to rivers, rather than a beach or a snow or anything like that. I love oak forests, and I love, small rivers running through them, and that's always been a place I've always gone camping, and I've always sought them out whenever I've been traveling. And then when I was upstairs and I came back, I realized why, because I think we're naturally drawn to our place of origin upstairs. But the first thing I noticed was the fact that I felt no fear. I felt very groggy compared to how electrified I felt on Earth. I felt like I was almost like walking underwater. And finally, as I was really reveling in the intense amount of selfless love that was bombarding me from everything I saw, and me returning it, feeling that flow of that intense love with no fear at all, no worry, no confusion, no anything that you can trace down to a fear impulse, that fight or flight impulse in human was perfectly gone. And then I turned, and there was a table to my left in a little glen in the woods, and there were people waiting, smiling. And so I moved over there, and that was my soul group. And they were cheering me and welcoming me back, but it was all being done telepathically.
Right. In the Newton Institute, it says that people who go right to their soul groups are old souls. Well, they know the routine, so they don't end up going through the procedure of, because a lot of that is helping you actually to the other side. You go to your guide greets you, and you go to your council. But that's all to kind of calm you down and get you settled. And then you go to your soul group. You went right to soul group, so you're an old soul. Okay. The interesting thing, I haven't really done a lot of research, and I'll tell you why. Whenever I start reading a book of someone else's near death,
experience or a deep soul experience, I always start weeping, because I think that in every human we have this longing to be in heaven, to go back there. It's like Earth is so dense and it's so difficult at times. And there are so many, because, hello?
Yeah. I'm
Okay.
listening.
There are so many times when I felt a really strong longing to go back, that I have no idea what that beeping sound is.
I'm here.
Anyway, I felt this insane longing. So there are very few books I've read entirely because of the fact that I just get very emotional. I was given a choice to come back. A lot of people are told you have to go back. It's not often that you get a choice. And I have to tell you, there's been a few times when I thought I made the wrong decision. Not that you can make a wrong decision, because either decision was perfect, But there are a few times when I've been kind of hit by a few tidal waves and been thinking, why did I come back here? What's going on? I'm not familiar with the authors that you were mentioning. Although, did you say Michael Newton?
Yeah, the Michael Newton Institute, he's regressed, his whole group has regressed, or progressed to the Life Between Lives,
I like that.
over 40,000 cases, and they have facilitators all over the planet. So it's not, it's research, but it is people, it doesn't matter what their belief, they all can go back to a death experience and what happens to them. And
right.
So, you were an atheist, but sometimes if you're, like a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever, you're met by your spiritual guide.
Mm-hmm.
But that falls apart because, it's usually somebody just dressing up like it to help you feel comfortable as you transition. And once you're back to that level of reality where you realize, oh, there's my soul group, then that stuff fades away.
Right. And then there's all those different realms, Remember when I was talking about walking through that field and seeing the divine consciousness, whatever it is, and it was so mind-blowing, and I felt like I could float up into it, and then I noticed to the side of it that I could see, it seemed like I was seeing through a glass floor, I could see a whole nother realm. And my Radu, who was traveling with me at the moment, I said, is there something up there? He goes, oh, yes, there's many realms. We can go up and we can come back down. And we laughed. And it just seemed perfect. And when I came back and I'm remembering that conversation, I'm trying to think of 1,000 questions I wish I'd asked, but it made perfect sense. And then when we were at the cliff and we were looking down at that whole realm that was on a beach, that was not all green and lush, but a beautiful beach with the sand looked like diamonds. It was sparkly. And the beautiful, beautiful boulders and tents, and the whole village was down there, a little town all up and down this beach. But it seemed a little stark to me, but that's just another realm for people, I guess, that love to be at the beach when they're on Earth. And I could see it on the horizon where the ocean, where the water went all the way to the horizon, and I could see, again, more of those. I got the sense, how sometimes you blow a bubble and it's big, but it has like other little clusters on it? That's how I felt. Right. I felt that we were just clusters of realms and that the soul was very open. I did talk to someone at a conference one time, and they were mentioning that they were just a spark of energy that had consciousness, but it was like they were a little tiny spark, and that's a whole other realm, I'm sure. It's just, I think the soul, the immortal soul, is the one that has the patterns in it and kind of decides where they go. And I think
that makes sense.
Pardon?
It makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, yeah. and it not one is higher or lower. I just feel that it depends on how we want to create. To me, the most important thing that I saw everywhere was growth. Everything. Like when I was walking into the village, into the Hall of Knowledge, everyone was studying. And when they were showing me how my group decided to come down, where that angelic presence came in and asked for volunteers to go down to Earth, and my group went in, part of my group went in. We were on a little break, but learning upstairs, learning and studying and bettering yourself is as joyous as vacation time is here, is on Earth, Mm-hmm. So it just seems to me that everything is geared towards bettering and growing and evolving, and that, that's the goal of coming back down here, is then to put it into practice and help here, and then go back upstairs, and if you stubbed your toe, you go back and review it. I know that there were reviews, and the other thing is, don't forget, I had a choice to make. So maybe I would have gone through the other stuff if I had chosen to stay. Although going right back to my soul group, immediately, it was very interesting. Now, did you read the back part where I worked with that man who did the astrology?
No, and Dr. Leslie hasn't read anything yet. So
well, it's just what comes up is you alluded to the relationship being over, and somehow or other the situation with the horses. How would you have redone that scene, or what did that dramatic scene in the relationship in which it was embedded?
You don't know how you came back to your body.
Teach you.
And then you started talking about how you went to your soul group and they were greeting you, but then what happened? That's another question I have. So go ahead and answer either one, or because I want to know what happens once you go back to your soul group. They're glad to see you.
They're glad to see me. We reviewed what I had gone through, and then they gave me a choice. They said when my soul group originally went down, there was 20 out of the 30 that went down. And one of the group members and I had agreed to meet on Earth and come back together, and in our early 20s. But what Mina, who was the other person, there was only 2 people in the whole group that I had a lot of conversation with. And again, this is all telepathic. And but when I'd ask a question, one or the other would answer it. And Mina was showing me that I had loved the Earth, and at the very last second, instead of going back with this soul group person or consciousness, I chose to stay because I loved the Earth. And she said, that's okay, but you had no contract. You had nothing written. So you were kind of just like flitting around because just, doing things to help people. But I didn't have a mission. I didn't have all the stuff that a lot of people talk about because I was supposed to be gone. And then she said, you now have 2 children that you didn't sign up for, but they're there, and that's okay. There was no judgment on anything. Now your decision, if you stay or if you go back, affects them. And we want you to kind of get acclimated here first before you make a decision. So that's when Rao and I took a little journey.
So how do you spell that? How do you spell Rao?
I spelled it R-A-H-U. Rahu. It's like Rahu. And
Rahu.
Mina.
Okay, so Rahu is part of your soul group, or are they guides?
They're part of my soul group, yes.
Soul group, okay. So you decided to go on a little journey with Rahu. What happened to Mina? Yes. Did she come too? Okay, so Mina and Rahu.
No, he took me over to a cave that I used to go to a beautiful cave behind a waterfall. And again, coincidentally, I've been obsessed with caves behind waterfalls. I've gone to so many in Hawaii, and any place I could find a waterfall, I always look to see if there's a cave behind it, because that's apparently, again, ingrained in me from upstairs. And I met Jesus. That's walking in to this beautiful, beautiful cave that was kind of carved in. It was circular. It was a white stone with some marble in it, like almost like a beautiful Italian marble. And Jesus was there, and he told me to rest. I had done a lot of work, and just being incarnated is a lot of work. And then we talked about forgiveness, and self-forgiveness, which was, and he took this beautiful sandalwood as he spoke that was sandalwood and rose. It smelled like sandalwood and rose combined. And he put it on all my chakras. And then he put it on my arms and my palms and my wrists, and then the bottom of my feet, behind my knees and my ankles. And he just kind of put it on, and he told me to rest. Now, when I opened my eyes, had closed my eyes, he was gone. And I waited. Again, time is not important upstairs. And I got up and I came out of the cave playing with the waterfall, and when Rao had left me right at the cave where the waterfall was, he pointed up to this, you could see some buildings above some tree tops, and he said, just come up there when you're done. Now when you're moving and walking, it's not like here where one foot stands in front of another. It has to do more with, you're just kind of glide. It's almost like slides. You're here, then you're like 10 feet further, and then you're 20 feet further, and then you're 5 feet further. And it's kind of like that. But it's not choppy. It's a flowing. And you're just poop, 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 and you're there. And so I went into the Hall of Records, and that's when I talked with Saraswati, who I had no idea who she was at the time. When she first said her name, because like I said, everything is telepathic, and when I'd hear the names, you'd know it would be like in my head. And when she said her name, it was just like music. And I was like, okay, I don't understand that. And then she said, okay, on Earth I'm called Saraswati. And we talked about why I came back at that particular time to answer your questions about the stampede. Was there was a part of me that had just given up. There was something in the paper about it was the anniversary of some woman who had killed her 3 children. And I had a little baby of my own. He was just a year old. And I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I loved being a mother. And I saw this picture of these 3 little girls, and they were so precious. They looked like there were 3, like 2, 1, and a baby. And they just had one of those photos where the 3 of them were all dressed the same, smiling. And so, silly me, I started reading the newspaper and read about these children who had been killed by the mother because she just didn't want to be a mother anymore. And the first thing I thought of was I would have taken them. And I felt so helpless because I think it's inherent in every human being that's normal to want to help when they see something going on. It's in our nature to jump in and help. I mean, it's just in our hard drive. And I felt so helpless. And there's something in me that just snapped. I was under a lot of pressure just from a lot of stuff working and from work and all this stuff. And, I loved being a mom, little, solace in life. I could hold my children and play with them and read to them. And something in me just gave up. And that was about maybe a few days right before the stampede. And another thing I was shown was that the immortal soul has different escape hatches that present themselves. Not all the time, but you going along, all of a sudden here's a possibility of an escape hatch, and the soul gets to say whether they'll go home or not the human mind, because the human mind would stay here for a million years if it could. So maybe that was an escape hatch that I popped up, or maybe I just had given up too much. But the next thing I know, I'm caught in this.
It's like you and the horses co-created this event, that somehow you co-created it with the horses.
Yeah, I guess on some level I did.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It was a way to go home, It was because I felt such, and this is Lesley atheist, borderline atheist or full-blown sometimes, depending on who I was talking to. I felt the circle was complete. I felt that, and I think that a lot of people, and I've had people come back to me after they've read the book and say, that helped me so much because my mother had a stroke, and I watched her body twitching as she's dying. And this one woman said to me, she said to the body, she said, "Mom, I know you're not in the body. I know you're dancing around this room someplace watching." And all of a sudden she felt like on the back of her head, she had curly hair. Her mom always used to muss it. And so she felt her hair get mussed. So she looked up and there was no vents around her. And then she repeated it again. She said, "I think that's you." And then she felt it again and she started crying. So she had to let me know that was so moving, because she read it and she saw me lecture. And then 4 months later, this happened to her mom. So I wonder, when people are leaving their bodies, I mean, I held my dad when he died and I saw his soul jump out while he was talking. And he was dying of, and he was talking, but I saw that he was dying. So I told my brother, because he had fallen, I said, "Just hold him. He's gone." And Tommy's like, "Well, he's still talking." I said, "No, his soul's right there. This is just winding down right now." And then within another 10, 15 seconds, he stopped talking, and that was that. But
wow. So it was a mid-sentence when he left his body. What was he saying? Do you have any idea what he was saying? Interesting enough, he was, my brother Tom was thinking, he's also an agnostic border atheist like me, or I was, and he was saying in his mind, I wonder if there really is anything on the other side, was anything over there. And my father looked him straight in the face and said, "Oh, Tommy, it's so beautiful here. Oh my gosh, there's my mom. I can see her." And he was telling Tommy how beautiful and the light that he could see all around and how happy and soft he felt. And then he died. So he was answering Tom's thoughts. Tom had not. Right. Wow. And then you say you're borderline atheist at the time, and then you saw Jesus. Now, what did he look like? And were you surprised to see Jesus because you were borderline atheist?
Well, I'll tell you another movie that made me burst into tears. Do you ever see that movie about the little boy that died? His father was a minister. He was 4 or 5. Heaven is Real. Is that the movie title? I'm so bad with the title.
I'll look it up.
Is that the title? And
I think
Greg
so.
Kinnear played the father.
Who plays the father?
Greg Kinnear played the father.
Okay, I'll look it up. But go ahead. What happened in that made you cry?
The point is, at the very end, there's a really cute part because the little boy who's 4. He has a near-death experience under surgery, but they resuscitate him. And then little by little, the little boy is telling his dad, he just comes out with things. He doesn't ever sit down and go, "Guess what happened to me?" Because he's 4 or 5 years old. It's kind of just a thing that happened. And he said, "I saw Grandpa." And he said, and Greg Kinnear's character is like, "What do you look like?" And he goes, "Wait a minute." So he goes and he gets a family picture of Grandpa. And Grandpa's older and he has white hair and he has glasses. He goes, "Oh, no, nobody wears glasses up there." And then he goes, "Aha." And he goes back, he gets his college book. So he brings his college book And he says, is he here on this page of all these different people, this senior photo? And he points right to the grandpa, and I go, there's Grandpa. He said, I'm your grandpa, And so there were just little things like that. And they were talking. He was talking to his wife, and there's a young girl in Czechoslovakia that painted a painting at the age of 8 years old of Jesus. And they showed a picture of it, and we were watching it at some friend's house, and I just burst into tears because that's exactly what he looked like. Only his eyes were, she has a little blue in them. For me, it looked like a little more hazel, and his hair was just a tad, maybe an inch longer. His beard was the same. But the look and the directness of his look, how piercing it is and how directly he's looking. So that was the way the being that stood next to me that I knew to be Jesus.
Now, who painted that picture? Was it a Czechoslovakian girl?
It's a little Czechoslovakian. If you just even Google it and put Czechoslovakia 8-year-old paints Jesus, and you'll see this phenomenal picture. And that's exactly what he looked like when I first saw it. I didn't know anything about her. And when I was watching this movie, I got really weepy when I saw that picture. I just had to put my head down and kind of like, oh no, because you just all have that longing to be back again.
Great. I'm looking it up. If you hear me typing, I'm going to pull up that 8-year-old paints Jesus. Okay, I've seen that. It's longer though.
We have an informant who she tells the same story that her uncle is Toth, who said, Jesus is part of the group that's come back to try to clean up the mess. So she gives me the same, that she was among a group that got left when she missed the rocket, so to speak. But this very similar.
Okay, here I blew it up. So his eyes are more hazel. She's got them more green, and his hair's longer. Is it dark like that?
Yes, and his skin was a little darker. He looked more Mediterranean, slightly darker skin and a little bit darker eyes, but not like swarthy, not like a Greek or but he was, just the eyes, the eyebrows, the nose, the direct look, but he was smiling a lot. He was only smiling. He was so radiant and full of love. It's almost like the edges of him blurred. He was so bright. And same thing with Stargate. She was very bright like that.
I've seen that. I've had near-death experiences, and it's almost like you can see the molecular structure moving, and it's the electricity or the energy that runs through every cell.
Right.
And that's what makes it glow.
And that's what I think that blue light was that was flowing off of us, because when I was upstairs, that little 1/4 of an inch of blue kind of came out to about 2/3 of an inch of blue. It was much bigger, and it was a flow. You could see that flow of everyone. It was like they were just congealed energy. But they were solid, because when I sat down, I sat in a chair. I didn't fall through a hologram. So it's not a holographic existence. It had solidity to it. And walking through the grass, I could feel it. Although when I put my hand in the water, when I took my hand out on the waterfall, I think that must have just been light, because my hand was dry.
Oh, okay. And then what else did Jesus say to you?
Well, it was very short. We talked about forgiveness and self-forgiveness, and how critical that is for self-forgiveness to really allow ourselves to be human, and to, instead of beating ourselves up, just learn the lesson so that you don't repeat the mistakes. That's all. That it's just like, which is funny, because as a psychologist and as a parent, I was always teaching everyone. I did a class one time, and it was for parenting, called Teach Your Children How to Make a Mistake and Keep Their Dignity. Because if we cannot make mistakes, if we have to be perfect, then we are doomed because there's no such thing as perfection. And we all think when we're teenagers that by the time we're in our 30s, we won't make any more mistakes. Wrong. There'll be fewer and far between, but they will be more profound and at much deeper levels. And recognizing that, that's part of what, we'll talk about a little bit more when we go into what did I bring back or what did I learn, because that was one of the lessons. And then the same thing with Saraswati. She was teaching me, how to just be, again, more open to a spirituality and to understand that there is a bigger picture and come back down and be more involved in my spirituality,
So the mistakes are part of the spiritual path. Then they're there for you to rise above them, to take them into consideration from the spiritual.
Right, but some mistakes are. Everyone makes mistakes. It's just how we handle them. If I make a mistake and I hurt someone's feelings, or I say something that someone interprets and I've hurt their feelings, it's up to me to apologize and learn from it. So if I have a friend that's blonde and I'm doing dumb blonde jokes and she says, please, I don't like those, some people go on the attack and say, well, you're too sensitive or whatever. And in my opinion, it's better to just say, wow, I'm sorry. And then remember that she doesn't like the dumb blonde jokes. It's not, that's a bad example because that's kind of a tasteless thing, but we all make mistakes.
That's really, I see what you're saying. Just be kind. Don't be uptight about it. Yeah, but you make mistakes, so be mellow if someone else does.
Well, we're wired to make mistakes. That's the most important thing. Is it's in our.
That's how we learn.
That's humans only learn by trial and error. Animals don't experiment like we do. We're the only animal on the planet that changes what our parents teach us. And that is huge. We're the only animal that invents. We are the only animal that will risk our life to save an animal we don't know anything, we have no loyalty to. We have a wild animal. It could be someone's dog that's caught in a river and we don't know the person. It could be a mountain lion caught in an illegal leg trap that these two hikers found, and they filmed themselves taking it, how they saved it. We risk our lives to save strangers and strange animals that have nothing to do with us. And that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. Those are the little tiny things that make a difference.
So you're over there having these experiences, and then you tell us about the choice to come back, and then we want to know what was going on. We have like 6 minutes, and then we'll be at the top of the hour, and there'll be a 5-minute break. So, keep going. We're listening. It's an amazing story.
So at that point, I came out of the Hall of Knowledge. There was Nina, and we went into a smaller room. And there was only 4 people who I met were part of my soul group, but they were on the other side of the table, so I didn't really see them very well because there was this big energy ball between us where they would show me examples of things. And so we sat down, we started talking about, now you're a little more grounded here, and you feel a little more congealed here, because I was like, felt like I was, had 2 glasses of wine the night before. And they said, we talked about how we choose our families. We talked about why my children picked me when they knew I was going to die. So that got into a discussion of how we picked. And then they asked, what do I do if I'm up here? And they talked to me about this very kind of interesting form of a bodhisattva that my soul group places on Earth. So that when we were asked to come down, the 20 of us came down as these blindfolded bodhisattvas. And what that means, we'll talk about in the next hour because it's a little bit longer. But it really made sense when I came back, because a lot of people especially it started in the 1860s, but it was heavily inundated starting in the early 40s to the early 70s. There was like a 30-year period where an immense amount of very, very old souls came down to play the role of these blindfolded bodhisattvas, to break the generational prejudice, to break the feuds, to break prejudice and hatred based on inconsequential things. You know, in other words, these blindfolded bodhisattvas went into very young families, but could not be taught the hatred that's passed on. Children are not born hating other children. They are taught that.
Well, that's an interesting insight. Some people take on the hatred of their parents and some people reject it.
Yes.
And they go.
And older souls reject it. Older souls can't be a younger soul. I mean, when my children used to go to baby play groups, because we lived way out in the countryside in this ranch, and so I'd bring them in, and there were all different color children. There was some from India. There was one black little child baby. These are 18 2-year-olds, 18 months to 2-year-olds, and then 3 and 4-year-olds for my 2 children. And they could care less. They all played together. It's the parents that teach, this skin color is different, or the religion's different, or the sports team is different. They're teaching this, prejudice or flat out hatred. And some kids will suck it up like a dry sponge and obey their parents and think like their parents. And other children question it and say, no, I can't think like that. That's wrong. They just can't do it. And there's so many stories about people like a kid that grew up in that tobacco family, the Reynolds family, and he disavowed the money. He walked away from it. He said, I can't be part of, you guys are just selling drugs legally. I'm not doing this. And he walked away from it all.
Wow. So you're learning all this stuff from Mina and Radu.
Rahu.
Rahu. Anyway, go down. Meanwhile, they're doing stuff back at your body. Now, were you aware of your body and them working on your body? Because I was dead one time, and I was able to be on the other side, going through similar things like you're going through. And at the same time, I was still viewing how they were trying to revive my body.
Oh, no, I had no concept of my body at all. Interesting. I had no concept. All I was focused on was there, because the realm, it was so far away from Earth. And at the same time, you're right, they were trying, what had happened was a ride came in. I had gone down, looked at the clock, it was 10 to 3. Another ride, the last ride's coming back, the last 2 rides. So I ran down to get the horses, because if a horse comes in and sees another horse with a saddle on, and he goes, I don't have to go up and get unsaddled, and just makes a beeline to the hay barn. And with a guest on it, that's not a good thing, because they're not necessarily the best horse people. So I look at the clock, I get down there. By the time they come back at 3, I'm already gone. I'm laying there. They came rushing up to me. A doctor happened to be on the ride. He turned me over and started trying to resuscitate me. After about 6 or 7 minutes, they stopped. He said that, this was all told to me later, he took off his watch, he had no respiration, I was gray. One of the cowboys said my lips were as blue as my jeans. And he said, she's gone, go get her husband. And a minute or 2 later, after that, one guy ran to try to find a blanket to put over me, because I was just laying there.
Hold that to go back to how you got.
Oh, we're dying to know.
I know, yes. We'll be back in 5 minutes. See you. Aloha, and welcome back to Stargate Cosmos. I'm your host, Jennifer Lesson, with my co-host, Alex Lesson, Thomas, and This is Revolution Radio Studio B. Our guest is Lesley Lupo, who's an author. We're in the middle of a fascinating story that she's talking about her death. This death experience. Back. Ready to go? Revolution Radio. Take Patreon off and make sure. Keep operating here. Let me, okay, Lesley, we're going to go back to you telling your story, and I'm going to hang up and come back on. Would that work? Just hang up and come back on? It might,
Well, you sound fine now.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so what did you want to say, Sasha? Come over closer to the mic. You're too far away.
Let's get on with the story. It's very exciting.
Okay, and you can speak up. Okay, so continue where you left off if you made a note for yourself. I also want to know, did you see any of your pets that had died before, or any of your family or friends?
No, again, I was not completely back. I had to make a decision, so I had a sense at one time that there was other things I could just not quite make out. And Rao said to me, "You're not completely here." So I may have or may not have. At the point we left before was when we were discussing these bodhisattvas. And to understand that, a bodhisattva, like we know the Dalai Lama is someone that comes back and incarnates to help again and again. It's a pledge that they make where they let go of soul evolution in order to come back and not go into heaven or nirvana. They come back as a teacher, a spiritual teacher. And so Nina showed me that ever since Homo sapiens has been on the planet, that there were older souls that would incarnate and wind up being the spiritual teachers. And these were the ones that were egoless. They had lights within them that the family recognized, and they served the divine in whatever mode. So they were shamans, or they were nuns, or they were as Homo sapiens grew and branched out into different tribes, they were the medicine people that were drawn or taught how to relate to the divine. And then as civilization started, they became, many people became the spiritual leaders, but some of them were ego-based. These were the ones that were truly egoless. And they would be born into the way I kind of talk about soul evolution is like a first incarnate soul would be in a baby play group, and a PhD in education would be an old soul, like a, very old soul, or a bodhisattva. And the soul just keeps going to school and keeps going to school and keeps growing until they get to this level of maturity where they can pick their own curriculum and they can come and go as they please, like postgraduate work. And so all through humanity's incarnating with all these bodhisattvas, and what I was shown that the majority of the bodhisattvas never known to us, but they happen to be born into a family that recognizes the child has a spiritual calling, and then the culture, the community, puts the child in with the teachers that will teach the child a spiritual path. And that's how and they're there to elevate our spiritual consciousness, which is part of humanity, not only all of humanity. So then what Mina explained to me was like by the mid-1850s, 60s, consciousness had gotten very global to the point where a new level of bodhisattva was coming down to break this hatred. So they, instead of being born into an older family that would see the child had a spiritual gift and bring it to the proper teachers, these were very young families that were either they could be very nice but very fundamentalist, as we do it this way, we can't talk to the people across the street, kind of mentality, or they were filled with hatred, or they taught prejudice, and these children would be going into those families. And as they were raised, they looked around, and the quest was to find the light within, which was extremely difficult because they looked around. And since I've written the book and I've sold so many copies of it, the number one letter I get back is, oh my gosh, now I get it. I always felt like a changeling, or I felt like I just didn't belong in my family, in my culture. I can't be limited to, they look at humanity, equality is evolving away from being based on sameness to oneness. And these beings are already there. And so these blindfolded bodhisattvas, which is a bit of a tongue twister, I wound up nicknaming them Houdini kids because I was watching a documentary on magicians, and they have Houdini, and he's blindfolded and he's tied up with a chain. They put him in a bag and they threw him in the river. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly what these blindfolded bodhisattvas do, because they're erased from their memory of who they are. They have the strength and the soul presence, but they don't have the soul memory. And they are put into young families, and they look around thinking, wait a minute, did I land on the wrong planet? This is not where I'm supposed to be. And they feel an outsider in their family or their culture or their schooling. In some major section of their life, they just cannot fit in, and they're the ones that are refusing. And it started in the 40s. What they showed me was after those 2 world wars, it decimated so many hundreds of millions of people that it was like this huge cry. And they said, okay, it's time to bring in these different bodhisattvas to go down there and start really breaking down that hatred and just saying, no, we're not going to do it just because your father did it and your father did it. And the Hatfield and McCoys, your great-great-grandfather killed my great-great-grandfather, I have to shoot you. That kind of mentality was systematically at a very grassroots level. Because one, being wiped out, think about it, you're halfway spiritually evolved. Let's say you're in high school in your soul growth. You're going to be drawn to going to a church. But what about all the younger souls that are still in kindergarten, and they have, when they have a light being come into their presence, one of the things the Houdini kids do is they actually transmute. They have the opportunity of transmuting the family. They don't fix them or save them, but part of what they do is they will absorb things. I call them the hockey pucks of the universe when they're young, because no matter what is done to them, they don't fall into hatred. They just walk away, or they eventually walk away. But all through college and high school, they feel like still outsiders. And it's usually in their 30s to 40s that they really begin to realize, I'm okay the way I am. I'm different, I don't fit in, and that's okay. And they begin to wind up meeting other Houdini kids, and they begin to have deeper friendships. It's kind of like being an adult when you're 4. And who do you talk to? You have a 4-year-old with an adult personality and development. It can be very isolating. And that's what my soul group did, is we placed these bodhisattvas, when it was time to place them, we would place them as far away from any other source of light so that they could bring light into darkness. And they would teach forgiveness by being extremely forgiving. They would bring a higher level of forgiveness. They would stop the chain of being taught hatred, and they would just kind of find their own light within themselves, which elevated consciousness. And they have to learn how to play.
I have to learn how to play. Who are these people that are my family? I felt like I was a stranger in a strange land, that I'd been deposited on Earth, and it's like, please, someone take me back home. Go ahead, Sach.
Well, just the archetype of the Bodhisattva is awakening within people in response to the times. And it's like Susie Hansen and others have said, this is it. Those people that feel the calling, they know it's there. This is the time to reach out in partnership with all the beings of this planet.
Yeah. And they're opening. I mean, look at the 60s, for goodness sake. I mean, we marched against the war. We marched for civil rights. We marched for organic foods. We marched for all these things, women having, equal rights. We wanted equality for all. And we broke down a lot of the racial barriers, a lot more interracial mingling. And today, it's interesting because one of the things that I was shown was that was the bridge between the indigo kids that are coming in today. Like, we came in and we actually inhaled all the swamp. It's like we absorbed it and we transmuted it to solid ground, where these indigo kids can just hit the ground running and be addressing the United Nations at the age of 12, and things like that. Yeah. A lot of huge changes are happening with the millennials and the next generation especially, where you have a lot of incredibly old souls that just walk in and they go, here I am. They're clear as a bell. They don't have any drama. They got to peel off of them, like the Houdini kids have to get rid of all this gunk that they've absorbed. And that's why I said we have to learn to play, and we have to learn not to transmute people by absorbing their negativity. We've got to learn not to be a vacuum when we're with a negative person, because it's in our nature to absorb and take away their pain, and that makes us sick. So it's a bit complicated.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So they're teaching you about the different waves of consciousness and bodhisattvas that are coming to the planet, and your role in that facilitation process. And then what happened?
Well, we decided I'd come back. I decided, because again, it was like they said, if you go back, it would be good for you to go back to your psychology background. Because I was working as Mrs. Tankervity Gestranch, and they said it's better for you to go and go back into your get that reinstated and go into a healing practice. And I was very psychic as a child, but it scared me, so I turned it off. And then in college, I had these teachers coming up to me all the time and saying, why do you have your light turned off? And I began to work with different shaman, medicine woman, a Wiccan high priestess, to get back into my intuitive psychic part. And then my fiance died, and I thought I should have seen it, so that threw me back into, it's all a bunch of hooey, and I'm an atheist again, and that's where I was until I had the head injury, which I came back and said, okay, I can't do that anymore, but who am I? Because I did come back. And like I said, they had given up on me, and they were waiting. One of the cowboys ran to go get Bob, my ex, and all of a sudden there was a jolt in my body, like a big spasm. And then I sat up. Now, I don't remember any of this. My memory is I felt like I'd hit the ground, so it must have been the jolt. I felt like I hit the ground. I'd gone into this place upstairs where all this energy was buzzing around me, and I felt like I was being squished into a sausage casing. And I was uncomfortable, and I must have cried out or shown like discomfort, because Raoul was there, and he stopped the process, and he said, you don't have to go back. And I looked at him, and I knew I would go back. I was okay with it. And I said, no, I will. And he smiled, and he kind of leaned forward, and he said, remember, breath is precious. And that was why I titled the book, because that's the last thing I heard before I got squished and popped into this jolt into my body. And I opened my eyes. I remember this so vividly, and I see this pale blue sky compared to the beautiful, cornflower blue sky that has so much depth and the other bubbles on top of it. And there's two men sitting next to me, and there's two women by my feet on my right, and they're crying and they're holding hands. And then I just felt like I slipped underwater. I closed my eyes, and I sat up and everyone started saying, Lesley, are you okay? Because I sat up bolt upright. And the man who was the doctor said to everyone, wait. And he said to me, can you tell me your name? And I said, well, everyone's calling me Lesley, so that must be it. And then he said, do you know where you are? And I said, Chicago. And he's like, no. And by that time, Bob came walking up, and they said, do you know who this man is? And I looked at him, and I said, is he my father? And they said, how old are you? And I said, 14. And they're like, no. And all of a sudden, I started leaning over, and they're saying, let's go to the doctor. I said, no, I'm fine. And then I just passed out. And I was in and out of ICU the first couple of weeks. I was in a coma, and I would come out. I don't have any memory of that, except for I do remember I had a friend who knew a naturopath that did craniosacral, and he would come in at night and treat me. And it felt like I was just kind of swimming slowly, side to side, up to the top of the water. And I'd open my eyes and I could see him. I'd kind of look back and I'd see him. It was nighttime, so there was only one light on, really low, because the nurses were letting him sneak in to do this. So I was getting this craniosacral work. And then it would just kind of slowly go back down. And my homeopathic physician had given my ex a mixture of some things to really help me. And I have to say that I think those two things were very important in my healing, as well as I did from the injury, because I do have my original CAT scans. And when I show them to neurologists, neurosurgeons, or radiologists, they all freak and say, you should be dead. This is not possible. And I was given,
so what were the things? Was this devices? Was it crystals? What were the two things?
They were, it was just craniosacral, which is energy work, and homeopathic remedies. There were no crystals or
I see what
devices. Yeah.
Gotcha. It was the techniques. They both work.
Yeah, they were just healing technique. One is an energy and one is a little pellet, with a remedy on it. And I think they helped a lot. And the interesting thing is this. I had almost complete retrograde amnesia. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know anything about my history. You could have said your name is Jack Sparrow, and I would have said, okay, because I had no idea. But I remember every single detail about that experience upstairs, and I was so full of joy, and I wanted to share it. I wanted to share it with people because I knew there was heaven. I knew there was something on the other side. And unfortunately, my doctor thought I was having a psychotic break. Well, those don't last that long, and I was in the hospital for about 2 months. I mean, it was a really severe head injury. And and every time I would try to talk about it, I had to go through physical therapy. I had to learn how to walk again and do all the things that I had to do. And all the time I'm trying to share it, and the doctor is running around to my family and friends saying, she's insane, don't let her talk about this. And after about a month, he came in, and he sat down on the bed. He started poking me in the shoulder. It was nighttime. Everyone had gone. And this little nurse came in. She was just checking things, and she was going to leave, and the doctor just threw the door. I mean, so dramatic. He just pounds into the room. He sits on my bed, starts poking me in the shoulder, and he says, if you say one more thing about this, I'm going to put you into a psychiatric ward, and I'm going to pump you up with so many drugs, you are not going to know if it's day or night. And then he stormed out. And halfway through his spiel, I had rolled over away from him and started sobbing, because I can tell you, I've never felt more helpless in my entire life, because he could easily do it. Everyone believed him because he was the doctor, and no one believed me. You know, even and the best part was this little nurse who had kind of stepped back when he raced in and raced out. She came over and I was sobbing. She sat on the bed. She just started kind of rubbing my back and just kind of almost like petting me, you know, just kind of waiting and waiting until I started crying, because that really scared me. And she said to me, she was the ICU nurse, and she said to me, this is not the first time I've heard this. Other people have mentioned. And I rolled over and I looked at her. And so she came the next night with another nurse, and we only talked 10 or 15 minutes. I mean, they couldn't stay long. But that was like the one little piece. It was like holding on to a piece of rice to save your sanity, because here I am. I'm a very logical, high IQ, science-studying person who's borderline atheist, and I come back and I can't be that person anymore. I mean, it really doesn't fit. And I don't know who I am. And instead of getting support, I'm getting everyone treating me like I'm insane. You know, in fact, a few years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I was at a party here in Tucson. There was a woman that knew me when I was married to Bob. And, you know, we said hi, and she said, well, you're looking really, really well. And I went, thank you. Was I not supposed to? You know, in my mind, I thought that. She said, yeah, didn't you go like into a mental place? And I went, pardon me? She said, weren't you in the hospital? And I said, yeah, I had a head injury. I was in the hospital for 2 months. But it wasn't a mental, it was TMC. She said, oh, I thought you were put into a mental. I mean, she was so tactless. But I'm like, no, ma'am, I wasn't. You know, I mean, it was good to know that those stories are still kind of, you know, because it's followed me through the first 10 years for sure, is people would hear my name and I go, oh, weren't you when they had a mental breakdown? No, I didn't have a mental breakdown. I talked to Jesus, all right? You know, I saw God. And so it was like, yeah, then they really start pulling out the funny farm. But this was also 1988. I didn't know of Dr. Moody, unfortunately. I had no idea. I did find that one book, Journey of Souls, and I had a hard time again reading it, because that was what I experienced. And I went, oh my goodness gracious. Now I know what happened. It does, you know, it kind of made me, there's my another little piece of truth that kind of keeps me from thinking, you know, because it's so ultra real. I mean, you're all in Hawaii right now, right? What if someone walked in right now and said, you guys, this is a dream. This isn't really happening. You'd be kind of looking at them going, yeah, sure, right. What's the matter with you? And you'd kind of go like, you know how they have that saying, pinch myself, pinch me, I'm dreaming. No, it wasn't a dream. It's so ultra real, you know. In fact, the first thing I remember writing about my experience was one sentence: heaven is real, earth is an illusion. This is an illusion. This is not real. Love and light and happiness and working towards bettering yourself, you know, and helping others, that's real. But a lot of the stuff on earth is just a place for us to show our quality or our lack of it. And if we stub our toes, so what? As long as we keep going, you know. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, they said that once you have a sense of God, all your karma is erased. When you have when you feel connected to the divine, it's like, it doesn't matter what your karma is, it's gone. Because you're not going to revert back to that person. You know, when you have that transcendent. You know, one of the things I tell people is one thing. First of all, remember, you are an immortal soul. You are immortal. In your gut, you have an immortal soul. And you have the human shell around it. So it's kind of like, picture your favorite little chocolate ganache piece, you know, in a little wrapper. The wrapper is the human consciousness. And the little candy center, if you like butterscotch or peppermint, I'm a chocoholic, so You know, that candy is the soul, and that sweetness is you, and you are immortal, and you are all holy men and women. No matter what religion, no matter with or without, no matter what you do in your career path, your family path, you are all holy people. You are holy men and women. I'm a holy woman. You are holy men and women. You don't have to be a saint to be a holy person. It's just being conscious of how my actions affect others. Just very simple things. It was so simple. It's like those silly random acts of kindness are literally what is going to change the world. It's grassroots things that are going to change the world. It's not one person coming to save us. It's everyone uniting. And it's that collective unconscious becoming more conscious. And it's those indigo kids coming in that are elevating and saying, we don't want a McMansion. We want to spend more time with our kids. We don't need to make $30 million a year. I mean, we want to travel, and we want healthy food, and we want time off to play with raise our families, and get to know people on a deeper level. You know, it's just so many magical things happening that we have to kind of keep our eye on what's good in the world and work to love each other and to, you know, not allow fear to sweep us, because fear-mongering is a big thing. It's been forever, you know. And, you know, basic psychology. Human reacts from one of two places, love or fear. The love is your soul, the fear is the wrapper. And one thing you can think of when you have an impulse, like my family background's Sicilian. So I get these little, you know, I want to slap people sometimes, but I don't, because I go, that's my human reaction. That's not me. You are your immortal soul. So when we have an impulse to slap someone, we go, oh, there's that silly human wrapper again. That's a little plastic wrapper. That's not me. What do I want to do? What does love want to do? Love is not going to roll over and be a doormat. That's fear. Love is strong. Love is going to take care of yourself, but not in a tit for tat. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. There's that generational feud again. You know, we're not coming from feuding. We're coming from self-love. And for me, self-love is rooted in humility. That's another thing I learned, was loving myself is not a sin. It's not vanity. It's not arrogance. Self-love is actually rooted in humility. Self-confidence is rooted in humility. You can have a lot of confidence on your skill set, but you base your character on your heart and what you do to help humanity within your, you know, within your means. Everyone thinks, oh, I can't help anyone, I'm not rich. Well, you can help people by, when you're driving, letting someone in with a smile, or smiling at someone, or saying thank you to people. When they do something, say thank you. And watch them light up like a Christmas tree. I mean, that doesn't cost anything. And those are those little tiny random acts of kindness that we can all be practicing and elevating. And that stuff stays.
So Lesley, we're living in these very challenging times right now, and things seem to be accelerating and moving faster and faster and changing radically. Since they were talking to you about, you know, the bodhisattvas and who came in when, did you get any insights from them about these times, you know, 2020, what was going to happen in the future, what's happening now? Did they, because, you know, time is fluid and we probably were accessing it all. What do you know about these times based on your experience that you had back in during this incident?
The things that they were showing me was, again, that humanity is breaking off into like extreme light and extreme dark. That's a pattern. They also showed me that it will accelerate to a place where it's almost absurd. And at that point, then it's almost like darkness has a lot more strength right now. But it's like the last wind. It's like the last gasp of that hatred. Because again, when you look at, there's a really, really, really good online magazine. It used to be a regular magazine I subscribed to, and it was called The Intelligent Optimist. And he's a man who got so tired of the negative news when there are so many phenomenal things being done every day that we forget about. Humanity is doing so much better than in the news. For everything negative you read in the news, there are at least 5,000 to 10,000 other extraordinary things that governments are doing and communities are doing to elevate and integrate and be a place of love and consciousness. Consciousness is definitely on the rise. Be aware of that. Look for it. Like I said, the Intelligent Optimist became the Optimist Daily. And he got so tired of the news. And it's not like a puppy saves a kitten like you see on the internet, those cute little things. It's people communities, governments that are pledging things and doing all sorts of things to really help elevate. And there's all these crazy things, like this 14-year-old kid who sticks a fork and wraps a copper wire in a certain pattern, and he lights up his mother's lamp, so she doesn't even have to plug it in. It's a magnetic field. People are, it's all these groundbreaking things for cleaning water, bringing electricity, bringing education, educating women, educating the communities that the women are valuable and they're not, doormats. And it's all this stuff that's going on that is making a significant milestones on the planet, for the planet, and for huge groups of people, not just, like I said, a puppy saving a kitten. It's magnificent how the world is evolving. But if you watch the news, they only focus on the negativity because that gets people's attention. And that's just been all throughout humanity. If, in the olden days, they used to hang people. Everybody went to go see it, That's because we have that part of us that's not me. That's them. Phew, I'm safe now. That's a primal thing. You see people always stopping at accidents. You see things like that because that's not me. And we feel safe when we see it happen to someone else, as if lightning won't strike twice. So it's kind of natural for the news to be pandering to what gets the most attention. But in reality, the majority of the planet is not. And you're right about the quickness of things, which really helps. I'll tell you an interesting story. In early 1970s, 1 or 2, I'm in the desert with a medicine woman, and I'm bemoaning the fact, that, it's just maybe 1971, we're marching and nothing seems to be changing. There's so much hatred and kids are getting shot at Kent State and all this crazy stuff is going on. And this medicine woman smiles and she says to me, by 2025, God will be discovered in a test tube, and humanity will recognize that, that God is present. And this is let's say 70, because it might have been 1970 or 71. And I'm like, okay, I'm 18 years old. This is the end of the world. Are you kidding me? We won't be here in 2025. And she laughed, and I said, and so what? They discover it. It takes 80 years for it, to get to humanity. I just read the book Gaia, and I'm like, it takes 70 years for scientific observation to become common. She laughed, and she just put her hands in a big circle, and she said, there'll be golden lines of light around the earth, and this information will be transmitted in seconds. And the internet is a blessing and a curse, It's a blessing in some ways, it's a curse in some ways. The nice thing is we can't hide anymore. We can't have something happen and not find out about it. Everyone's got a cell phone. Everyone videotapes things, That doesn't mean everything you see is real, because a lot of it is staged. People want their 15 minutes just be objective, Listen, learn with your heart, feel with your heart. And if this is a person who's going through some drama, just say a prayer for them, because prayer really, really works. The power of prayer is phenomenal,
So did she give you any more hints about how God is discovered in a test tube? That's a curious statement.
Well, it isn't really, because there's a guy here at Tucson that puts on a meeting with all these different physicists, and he started about 40 years ago, and it's called the Science of Consciousness. And I've gone, it's all these physicists from around the world, and I've gone the last probably 8 times, and it is phenomenal how many, the materialist scientist says, ashes to ashes, dust is dust, there's nothing else. And the post-materialists are the ones that believe in consciousness and a soul. And they say that the body is like a television that is transmitting what God or the divine or the immortal soul is is playing with. But it is the scientists, the materialists say, no, the body generates the soul, and then the other scientists go, no, the soul generates the body. And the thing that's interesting, in the very beginning, it was evenly balanced between materialist and post-materialist. But you go to the 30 and under lectures, these physicists that have these little private lecture series, and they're all about the divine and consciousness and the soul, and they're discovering that there is consciousness. In fact, there was this one man, I think his name was Bennett, his last name, and he was about 80, and he had a big beard. He looked like one of the old, farmers, that the big stout man with the big beard. And he's a very staunch materialist, and he was on a panel with 2 post-materialists, and all the kids in the audience and the people in the audience were kind of asking questions that kind of challenged him. And he finally said in a rather grumpy tone, he said, I feel like a cop at Woodstock. And everyone cheered, and it was what he was looking for, He wasn't saying it for comedy. He was saying it for comedy. He was nobody was going along with it.
Oh.
So yeah, scientists all over the world are discovering consciousness. There are so many books by phenomenal science physicists and neurologists that show it is not just a biological reaction. It is not just a reflex of hallucination of drugs your body produces at death that makes you think that there's actually a heaven. There's so many data seekers that are doing it, like Bruce Grayson and Sam Parnia, and they're doing these phenomenal studies for 30, 40 years that are really bolstering the data that goes into and the science that goes into what is happening. And the fact that so many people are having them now is because we're getting so good at resuscitating people. And even Pim van Lommel, that doctor in the Netherlands, he did a 20-year study that was written up in Lancet on near-death experiences, and finds about 20 to 30% of the people who were resuscitated had one. Another interesting thing, I was asked if I wanted to remember. And I said...
You weren't resuscitated, right?
I said yes. No, I came back. They gave me up to dead. They weren't doing anything at the time when I popped back in. They had stopped saying she's gone. But I was asked if I wanted to remember.
Mm-hmm.
Upstairs, and we talked about it, and I decided to, and she said to me, Mina said, it's going to be very difficult that way. It will be very isolating. And you're upstairs. You go, it'll take you several years to get back on track. I went, what's the big deal? It's like the finger, the clipping from your little finger time-wise. And then I'm sitting here on my bed sometimes sobbing, thinking, what was I thinking of? This is hard. Because when you're upstairs, everything is so full of love,
Lesley, what it did ultimately, though, is it made you have contact with people that you can be genuine with and share this kind of experience. it ultimately led to a sisterhood.
Yeah. But it took me a long time to talk about it. It took me a very long time to talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't really talk about mine until I met my husband. So mine happened when I was 4, and I came back, and that same thing. They were trying to resuscitate me, and I just spontaneously, they left me for dead, and then I spontaneously popped up. But I didn't really share it until I met Sasha, and I was 40-something, 43, I think, when I finally got the story out. But I just held it in all those years. Couldn't tell anybody what really happened. So,
oh no.
But this is really good because you're out there teaching now. You say you do a lecture every year. Where did I see that? What's it called? So you're teaching at a university level now about consciousness?
No. I was invited by a professor to do a presentation to his class. I'm not teaching. I actually work in town at a resort, health and wellness resort called Canyon Ranch, and I work there. I do personal one-on-ones with the clients. I also have a web page. People will read my book and reach out to me there, and I'll do one-on-one. It's like a inner journey work, to show where they're missing a piece, or here's some homework for you. And it's really nice because, like I said, the people that are coming for a spiritual journey are usually a lot older souls. They're not the younger ones. I'm an intuitive. I'm a psychic, and I work at Canyon Ranch. They have a metaphysical department. And then I do lectures. I do workshops. But right now, I'm writing a more detailed book, including exercises for the Houdini kids. And I've put one up online already about having boundaries, having gentle boundaries, because Houdini kids don't ever want to hurt anyone, and that's why they wind up getting victimized. They almost like they're selfless to a fault. And we want to always be selfless. We should be selfless, but not to a fault, because then that kind of brings in the predators. And when we have that part of us that says, I deserve to have the same quality of maturity and integrity that I embody, I just want equal, I just want the same, then we are capable of attracting that to us. But when we feel like we have to heal everyone that crosses our path, we get bogged down. In fact, I've had certain clients that got so sick when they were therapists that got so sick working with people. I also got them to get trained up to a Reiki master, because then you're becoming like a leaf blower, where you're blowing the energy, the negative energy, off the person, and it just dissipates into sparklies or butterflies, whatever you imagine it. So it's not going to stick on someone else. But instead of like inhaling it like a vacuum cleaner, I'll take this on me because I'm an older soul and I can take it. Well, you take enough garbage onto yourself and it bogs you down. And it's depressing. I mean, life becomes very depressing. When we can heal and help without taking it on ourselves, then we are in a place where we can help others and not be depleted or drained by helping others. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you have any comments or questions?
Oh, yeah.
Sasha?
It seems like a balance of giving and taking, and allowing yourself to witness in a neutral way what's the appropriate level of reciprocity is part of the transcendent grabbing the poles of giving and taking. You're not trapped into either one. And so it is with every one of these separations, and you could even take when you're feeling fearful, you could say, part of me that's being fearful, what is your concerns? Where are you coming from? And usually the function of fear is for you just to pay attention, to be aware. And the other thing is that it seems to me that every experience you have, if you reflect upon it, adds to your awareness, and so you don't keep getting trapped in the same dichotomy, but you can sort of get the whole picture.
Yeah.
So you're working at this Canyon Ranch. Where's that located at? What part of the world?
In Tucson, Arizona.
So it sounds like you had the perfect job. So that's great.
I didn't hear that last comment. Could you?
It sounds like you have the perfect job for you.
I do.
It's like your life has manifested into exactly what you're supposed to do and something that feels good doing.
That's what Mina said, because as an aside, when I was right before I had finished, she said to me, if you go back, go back. And then she just made this comment really calmly. She said, there is a place near you where all these light beings are working. And it will be very close to where you live. And there are many, many, many light beings, and you will be drawn there. Now, I was living on Tangerville Guest Ranch when I came back. We got a divorce about 3 years after I came back. And we had problems before the marriage. We couldn't work them out. So finally we parted ways. And I moved into town. Now, way out in Tangerville Ranch, that's the very far east side of Tucson. There's no health centers, and I didn't know what she was talking about. So I found my house, and literally a 7-minute drive from my house is Canyon Ranch. And I was going back to doing the intuitive work. I work with tarot cards or just channel. And I had a client in California that I had met. Someone had introduced me, and I was working with her. She was coming to Canyon Ranch, and when the tarot card reader was leaving there, she said, oh, my God, I know the best person. She lives in Tucson. So I went over there, and I interviewed, and she's a really big name, and so they listened to her. And so then I went up there, and I took the job, and that was like 24 years ago. So, yeah, it is ideal. The people I work with, there's all these extraordinary, it's a body, mind, spirit healing center that's very, very strongly, built by this man named Mel Zuckerman. And he and Jerry Cohen formulated it and built it to what it is. And it's like a beacon. Everybody knows Canyon Ranch. It's a very famous place. And it just is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. The abilities of everyone that works there is really wonderful, and it's magical. It's a magical place. The people I meet there, all over the world, people come there, and my bosses it's really a phenomenal place to work. They have a spiritual department, they have a metaphysical department, they have health and healing, they have physiology, they do, everything.
Do you have the website? I'll put that on your page.
Wow, I want to go there.
Yeah,
it's
that sounds great.
It's on my webpage. If you go to my webpage and you see where I work, it's highlighted, so you can click on it and go directly to the ranch.
I will do that. Now, I'm reading part of your story, and you say, even the concept of time, of distance, a here and there was different. I encountered one consciousness that connected every particle to the whole. My distant earth mind seemed like a ticker tape machine, spewing things out into the lines. Here upstairs, all information, all movements absorbed into me instantly. My mind's ability to process all the data simultaneously astonished me. And then right before that, you say time, that physical sense of seconds as they tick by, like little soldiers on a march that drained away my future, did not exist, at least as I knew it before. A circular energy kept everything eternally present, timeless. Nothing could age here. So those are two fascinating paragraphs.
I like the way you write.
Yeah, and you're a very good writer.
Thank you.
So this was a sense of timelessness. So time didn't exist there. Time is a constant. No. Explain that to me. It's your words.
Well, I think because of the fact that when we were talking, like when I would ask a question and it was telepathically done, and, several times I would be writing answers that would go over a discussion or would go over several pages. And if you read it out loud, it would take you several minutes to read all of the information that I was downloading, like with Saraswati. She was putting all this, and yet when it downloaded into me, it was like that. It was like the first sentence, the first word, or the first concept, and then everything was not only completely downloaded, but completely comprehended. So the sense of time, I mean, if I sat and told you the entire story, start to finish, it would probably be about an hour and a half, solid talking about every single thing that happened. And it actually, they said I was gone maybe 13 to 14 minutes. We tried to figure out how long I was dead. The doctor that turned me over, when he started the resuscitation, he was doing it, he said later, for effect, because already my skin was gray, my lips were blue, and he thought, being a doctor, he thought, she's dead, but I have to do this. We have to see if we can get it kick-started. And
Uh-oh. Right. Oh, no.
The kickstart did it.
The kickstart booted her off. Well, okay.
Hi, this is Lesley.
What would you like to say?
I'm going to be out of town until the 28th of January.
Her phone ran out of juice or something. It needs to be kick-started. Anyway, what did you think about this show, Thomas? About our guest today, Lesley Lupo. Yeah. Does it resonate to anything in your belief system or in your life? Mm-hmm. Have you ever... Oh, it's not. Okay, so that'll be... Okay, so I guess we want to just conclude this. Sasha, what did you think about today's guest and her concepts? And
So, the best thing when you hear a wise person, like Lesley, is to just shut up and listen and let it go in, because she got a lot of real wisdom. And once your intellect takes this stuff in, you can't help but use it because it's good stuff and it's going to program you to have a better life. So I really dug it myself.
Right. Well, I'll just go over for her. Her website is lesleyjonlupo.com, LesleyJoanLupo.com. And her book is Remember Every Breath is Precious. Dying Taught Me How to Live. And it's a wonderful book. It's available on Amazon.com, I think. Yeah, I got the Amazon link. And as you can tell by this episode, she's able to go into great detail. Most people, when they come back, they have just a little snippet. And that is today. Thank you very much. Hey.